Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to a very special edition of the show here today. I've got as my guest, Mr. Barry Goudreau here on the Zoom. Barry, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure.
How you doing, Peter?
Doing good for a Wednesday evening. I hope you are as well. And
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to have you. I'm glad we can make the connection. And a lot of people are interested in kind of getting up to speed with what Barry Goudreau's been up to for a while. So, I guess for most folks, obviously they remember you from Boston, but you were pretty busy in the years after that with Orion the Hunter and Rtz and a few other projects. So, maybe kind of get people up to speed with what you've been doing. I know you and the late Brad Delp had worked on an album together back in the early 2000s, I believe. So what have you been doing over the last, bunch of years? I know you've been doing lots of different projects, played some shows and things like that. Maybe you can kind of fill us in.
Well, I have my own group, Barry Goudreau's Engine Room. We've been doing that for the last 4 years now. Put out our first CD back in 2017, and we have a new one ready to go. It'll be coming out on March 19th.
Oh, wow. So this is perfect timing then.
It is, absolutely.
Oh, very cool. So could you talk a little bit about what folks can expect on that album and kind of what you guys play?
Well, the first CD we did, I was kind of looking back to my blues roots. I learned how to play guitar playing along with, Chicago blues records. Paul Butterfield Blues Band with Mike Bloomfield was huge for me. And I pretty much learned how to play lead guitar playing along with that. So the first Engine Room record was really looking back at my blues roots. So it's kind of a bluesy record, some straight ahead rock songs and some straight ahead blues and some that's kind of in the middle. So this newest CD, again, this time I'm looking back to the early 70s, my influences before, Boston took off. And, I was a big fan of, the James Gang and early Deep Purple and, those kind of acts. And I think
you're speaking my language, Barry.
It's it's classic rock at its peak. And, I'm really excited about this record. It has, I think, the most and the best guitar playing I've ever done. All right, there's more lead guitar work on this record than the last 2 or 3 I did combined. So I'm really excited about that.
Wow. So how will folks be able to order this? Because I need to get myself a copy of this. Because
well, you can get one for free.
Well, thank you.
Well, we have a website, Barry Goudreau's Engine Room, and you can also go to my own site, barrygoudreau.com. to order it there through Venmo or post office box. And, there's a bunch of information there and videos and some little snippets of the songs that you can get an idea what it's about. Oh, and that's coming out on March 19th.
Wow, that's awesome. So, I talked to a lot of folks in different bands and whatnot over the last year. And, COVID-19 has put a big hurt on the music industry. So from your perspective, has the pandemic hurt live shows for you, or did you have anything planned last year? And how about you got the new album out, and most bands and musicians, when they have a new record, like to at least try and support it as much as they can live. So what are your kind of plans on that route, going forward, even though we are where we are, here in 2021?
Yeah, well, obviously the COVID thing was totally devastating to the musicians. When you make a living by being out in front of people and in groups of people, it absolutely just kills you. The last gig that I did was New Year's Eve in 2019 was the last show we did. We had other things booked, but COVID came in and just shut everything down. For me, I'm in a position where I can get through it, but the rest of the players in my band are really having a hard time getting through it. I mean, without being able to work and being an independent, self-employed, there's not a whole lot of government help there. So it's been tough.
Yeah, I can
imagine. But the good thing about it is we had most of the record recorded before the COVID thing happened.
Okay.
And we actually did write one song after the COVID, but over the computer and telephone, and it worked. We got a good song out of it. I wouldn't want to have to do a whole record that way, but we're looking forward to getting back out this summer. We're planning on having a record release on June 5th, and here in Massachusetts, we're hoping to have enough people vaccinated at that point that they're going to want to come out and do some shows, and hopefully by the end of the summer we'll be up and running again.
What are some of the I mean, I know the Massachusetts area fairly well. What are some of the places that you were like kind of earmarking to play, or where were you guys playing previously before COVID kind of hit?
Yeah, well, Tupelo up in New Hampshire, we've played. The House of Blues we've done. We did the Hard Rock Cafe in town. It's a place called Spire down in Plymouth. It's a regular spot. The Bull Run out in Shirley is, all the rock and rollers make it through there at some point. So, and there's other things that we pick up along the way, but there's some good venues still. Hopefully they'll still be around by the time we get out.
Well, yeah, that's the thing,
I
right?
know there's a chance that some may never come back.
They may not make it. Yeah,
Really
we're seeing the same thing in New York here. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
much different. So I mentioned the album you did with Brad back in the early 2000s. So I mean, that's a whole tragic story. So when was the last time you actually worked with or spoke to Brad before his passing?
Actually, we back in 2006, it was the 30th anniversary of the first Boston record. And at that time, Tom Scholz and I had been back in touch and had spoken on the phone several times. And he sent out the remasters of the first two records. And I was listening to the remaster of the second record, and I hadn't listened to the whole record all the way through in ages. I don't go back and listen to much of what I've done in the past. I'm always trying to look, forward rather than the past. So while I was listening, I picked up the guitar and I was playing along with it. And I was like, wow, I remember this. And after it was over, I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to write a song that kind of thanked the fans for sticking through for all those years. And so I came up with some chord changes, and I gave it to Brad, and Brad wrote lyrics for it, a song called Rockin' Away. And, we presented that to Tom, in the spirit of, the 30th anniversary and being able to speak and be in the same room, so to speak. And that didn't really work out too well, unfortunately. And unfortunately, in 2007, Brad, of course, passed away by suicide, and his family and I decided, well, let's put this song out, to be the last thing that Brad will have sung on, and kind of a nod to the fans. So we took Brad's vocal and redid the music under it, and we put that out back in 2007. I don't know if you've heard that one, but you can find it. You can find it on iTunes, and actually I was on Amazon today, and it's on Amazon. But it's a good rocking song.
Yeah, I will seek that out. I'd love to hear that. I mean, what was it like working alongside a guy like that? So much talent.
Brad was absolutely one in a million. If he was sitting next to you and he was singing, it sounded as though it was already processed through all the best equipment. His voice was just spectacular, and his pitch was great, and his sense of harmony was just fantastic. I've got a home studio here where we did most of our work, and Brad would never tell me what he had. I'd give him some chord changes, and he'd come to sing it, and I would never have heard it before he stepped up and sang it. And he'd say, give me a track, and he'd sing one part. He says, give me another one, then it'd sing along with that. And he would do that track after track and layer it all up, never having to redo any of the parts, getting every one of them perfect every time. And, you know, like a symphony. It was just incredible, super talented.
Yeah.
It was very sad for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It hit all
You
of
know,
us. I mean,
none of us really saw it happening. You know, you know, I think kind of feel guilty that you didn't realize things were that bad for him, that you could have stepped in. But
well, but I mean, that's usually what most people say when they know someone who they've lost to suicide. It's like, you know,
yeah,
how did we not see this coming, right? And you
yeah,
think, you know, I mean, everybody that I've spoken to who either knew him or knew people who knew him said he's a happy guy, you know, with all the talent in the world. And sometimes it's, you know, you just don't see what's going on inside someone.
inside, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So take us back. Let's go back to the late 70s. So, I mean, you guys were like on the top of the world. What was it like being a part of that, the Boston experience in 77, 78, 79? I mean, what was that like? That must have been intense, crazy, all that wrapped up in more.
It was absolutely intense from the day that the first record came out. You know, we had hoped that that first record, if we could sell 200,000 records, you know, we had a chance of doing another record and having some sort of musical career. Of course, we sold that many records in, you know, the first few weeks.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had to set up to do our first touring, going out to the Midwest, playing in some nightclubs. And, you know, we didn't have the equipment we needed. We didn't have any of the people we needed. And we're playing in these nightclubs, and there's a crowd going around the club 3 times, people trying to get into the show. So it was a tremendous amount of pressure on us and of course the record was so fantastic, and you know, people didn't think we'd ever be able to reproduce it. In fact, one of the first arena show we ever did was at the Providence Civic Center, and we were opening up for Jeff Beck, who, you know, my idol, Jeff Beck. You know. And we didn't really have the people in place and the equipment at first time and a big stage. So, you know, it was a lot of pressure. And I'm up on stage and I play and I look over and there's Jeff Beck and Joe Perry both standing there with their arms crossed 10 feet away from me. It's like, oh my God. Well, anyway, after the show, after Jeff's show, we went back and we got to meet Jeff and speak to him. And, you know, of course, he was on Epic Records. We were on Epic Records. He said, you know, I heard your record before I saw you guys. And he said, I never thought you'd be able to reproduce it, but you did it. It really sounded great. It's like, oh, oof, a relief. Yeah.
That's a great story.
So from there, we did a first national tour, which was opening up for Black Sabbath, which on the face would seem kind of like an odd pairing, but it really worked out well for us. It worked out great for Black Sabbath too, since they were, you know, we were on the way up. They were kind of fading, and sold a lot of tickets. They appreciated it. And, you know, it was a really fun tour, and I think that's where we really pulled ourselves together. Then by the beginning of 77, we were headlining already. I mean, this was 6 months after the first record came out.
Because it kept selling and selling and selling and selling. It was like a runaway train, right?
And, you know, we went out and we toured arenas. We went around every major secondary and tertiary city twice in the whole country in like a year of touring. And absolutely fantastic. And then, of course, there was a period between that and the second record. And when the second record came out, we started off doing arenas, and then we went from there to stadiums. So now we're playing the Superdome, we're playing Anaheim Stadium, Giant Stadium, on a scale that was just, unbelievable. So I mean, it was really quite a ride.
What was the biggest audience you guys played to?
I think it was the Superdome. There were 88,000 people in the Superdome.
What's it like walking out on stage to 80,000 people? That's got to be quite the rush.
Well, I remember the Superdome really well because the stage was really, really high up, and you had to walk up this long stairway to get up to the stage. And of course, at the time, we were wearing the big heels and the tight pants and everything. So making your way up there, just let me get to the top of the stage without falling down. And then, when you walk out to the front of the stage, I mean, it's a couple of stories down. If you were to go off the stage, you're dead. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's really crazy. And the crowd was so far away, it was almost like, a backdrop or something. Crazy.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I talk a lot about how, there's a couple of years between the debut and the follow-up, Don't Look Back. And despite the fact that, the debut sold massive amounts and the second album sold a lot less, you guys sold a shitload of records of the second album as well. I mean, that was, by any other band, that second album is a absolute blockbuster, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative, I suppose. People say, "Oh, yeah, that didn't do nearly as well as the first." Well, it still sold like 6 million records. I think most people would say, "My God, if I could sell 6 million records, my God, yeah." So yeah, it's and then the third record was, I think, like 5 million. And I was like, "Oh, they're fading out now."
Yeah. 5 million. Most bands would take that in a heartbeat, right? Yeah.
Yeah, well, nobody sells that many records nowadays.
No,
I mean,
forget it. Yeah.
there's,
Yeah.
maybe, a half a dozen artists who are still up in that vicinity.
Yeah. You have any regrets from those early days? Anything you wish you guys would have done differently?
I don't know. I did a solo record after the second record, and Tom had gotten us together and said, I'm going to take a year off. If you want to do another project or a solo record or something, now would be the time. And I hadn't really thought about doing a solo record. I love being in a band. I've always, wanted to be part of a group. So I started working on it, and Brad and I, I came up with some material, had Brad sing on it, and we brought some songs to Tom, and in the hopes that he would say, "Gee, I really like that. I'll consider that for a Boston record." But instead he said, "Well, I'd like to produce this record for you." But we realized that the record company would never let him, produce a solo record when they were pushing to get a Boston record.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and got the record done and out in that year period that I was given. And of course, everything went to hell after that. The record company put an ad out that said, 6 million people have heard the sound of this guitar. We want to introduce you to its owner. Well, I took that as, well, here's the other guy that you don't know about. We want you to hear him. Tom heard that as, here's the guy behind Boston that you didn't know about. And he was livid about it. And of course, that ended up in me leaving the band. So any regrets I might have had were that if I had known that record was going to be a career record, not just something I was doing on the side, I would have spent a lot more time in focusing on it and not put it out as fast. And, maybe had rethought that whole situation a little bit better, but hindsight being 2020, yeah.
I think to a lot of fans, though, your solo album is like a de facto Boston album. I mean, it sounds more like Boston than some of the records that came a little later on. That's,
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, it does. It's a great album. It really is.
Well, I mean, it had Sid playing drums and Brad singing. So the comparisons are, obvious. But, Sib and I had known him since I was 15 years old. One of my best friends. I saw him every day, and when I started working on songs, it was like, who am I going to have to play drums? Well, Sib, I see him every day. Come on, sit down, play some drums for me. And it was a similar situation with Brad. So I don't know. It just seemed natural to me. It just kind of flowed. So there wasn't any ulterior motive there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, this is a question that's probably you've been asked a million times over the years, and I know people still talk about it. So, I mean, when you were working with Tom, like, how did you guys work out, like, who plays the solos, and like, how much is Tom, how much is you? There's all sorts of theories out there, and who played what on those first two albums. Is that like a big mystery, or is it just
No. Tom played the majority of the instruments on the record, and I think everybody realized that from the beginning. I mean, we didn't try to cover that up. When Tom redid the masters of the first two records back in 2006 for the 30th anniversary, he redid the credits on them to show exactly who played what. So, I mean, if anybody wanted to, know exactly who played what, those are accurate, as opposed to the original copies where, it just said Barry guitar, Tom guitar.
Yeah. And then when you guys went out live, how did you kind of split it up when you guys toured?
Oh, well, obviously, most of the songs had harmony guitar, so the two of us, played all those. Some of the single solos were mine. I played the solo in Long Time. I played the single line stuff on Don't Look Back, and played most of the guitar on the songs that Brad wrote.
Very cool. So, all right. So after Boston, got this little band that you put together called Orion the Hunter, which that's
when I was working on my solo record, I realized that it was looking a whole lot like Boston, and having Brad sing the whole record probably wasn't the best idea. So one of the crew members said, I know the singer, he's really great, and he's super on stage, it's a great guy. And he introduced me to Fran Cosmo, and Fran had written some songs, and we used a couple of his songs on my solo record. So when it was time to put a new band together, he was the obvious choice. So, I hitched up with Fran and brought in Michael DeRozier, who had played drums with Hart, because, we had done a lot of shows on the road with Hart, and I got to know him. And, he was out of Hart at that point, gave him a call, and he came out and moved to my house here for 6 months or so while we put the record together.
It's a really good album, and did pretty well for you guys, and you got the tour.
Yeah, we did pretty well, and we had a video on MTV. Unfortunately, we were on the light rotation on MTV, and which that's only a couple of plays a day, and it wasn't really enough for a breakthrough for us. But we did go out and tour. We did a tour opening up for Aerosmith. Actually, it was their Back in the Saddle tour.
Yep.
They were back, but I don't know if they're quite in the saddle yet, because they still had all the drug and alcohol problems. And, it was crazy. They had stiff crowds so many times that they didn't sell any tickets in advance, and they'd show up at the venue, and the local radio station would say, Aerosmith is at the venue doing a sound check. And they would have a walk-up that would fill the whole arena. But had some crazy times. My wife came out to visit me one time, and we had done our set, and we had come off, and they were waiting for Aerosmith to go up, and we saw them carrying Steve Tyler out of the dressing room. There's one guy in each arm, and his feet were like dragging behind him. Had bring him to the stage. My wife says, "Oh, we got to stay and see what happens." I said, "I know, he'll be fine. He'll go up there." So we left. Well, it turns out he gets up on stage and staggers around up on stage, and Tom Hamilton, the bass player, gets pissed off at him and punches him and he lands out in the audience. Show's over, everybody leaves. So we're on the bus, and I said, what are we gonna do? You know, do we go on to the next gig, or is the tour over, or what do we do? We said, you know, we'll go off to the next city and just see what happens. So we get to the next city, it's like nothing happens, right?
Probably
Back
didn't even
to
remember it, right? I don't know how well you remember the individual gigs, but I actually saw that tour in Middletown, New York at the Orange County Fairgrounds. And that was the night of the big electrical storm. I don't know if you
Oh,
remember.
it was like a racetrack, right?
Yes,
Yeah, I remember that.
I was
Oh,
there.
boy. Yeah, it was like mud up to our knees, right?
Yeah, it was pouring rain. The lightning was going crazy, thundering. The bands played. Both of you guys played. So yeah, it was a long time ago.
Troopers, we're troopers.
That's right. That's right. So after Orion the Hunter, you put together a few years later RTZ, which again, kind of an extension of Boston and Orion the Hunter, but much more modern sounding, I think, you know, as moving into the 90s. Your memories of the RTZ band?
Keyboard player Brian Mace had joined Orion the Hunter as our keyboard player to do the tour. So after Orion the Hunter, I kept working with Brian, and he introduced me to Dave Stefanelli, the drummer, and Tim Archibald on bass. And we started doing demos to put a new band together and work with a couple of different singers, one of them being Fergie Fredrickson, who had sang with Toto.
Yep.
Super guy, great guy. And
Great
you know,
voice.
we put together pretty much a whole CD, and we did a showcase for John Klodner. I don't know if you know John, who he is. He
Oh, yeah.
is the A&R guy who's pretty much behind Aerosmith, you know, them coming back. And you know, we did the showcase. We thought it was fantastic. And then after the show, John Klodner says, you know, he's got a really strange voice. Well, you know, I didn't really hear it. It's like, oh no. And you know, Fergie, we had worked on it for like 6 months, and you know, obviously there's no money in anything when you're just doing demos. And it got to the point where Fergie felt like, you know, I got to move on and do something to make some money. You know, I got to move on from this. So, you know, we kept working, and it was like, well, what are we going to do? Well, yeah, I give Brad a call. Hey, Brad, why don't you come down and sing some songs for me? And, you know, he came down, sang a few, and, you know, he was really enthusiastic about it, started writing lyrics, and, you know, it just all came together. And, you know, we ended up doing the record for Warner Brothers and going out and touring on it. And the ironic thing is, you know, Brad left Boston in order to do the RTZ record and tour. So Tom hired Fran Cosmo, who had been the singer in Orion Hunter, to replace Brad.
Like musical chairs back and forth between.
Yeah. And then, you know, later on after RTZ, both Brad and Fran were in Boston. So
Yeah, exactly. Do you have any favorite songs from those three bands, and anything that kind of you can think, you look back on, you're like, yeah, I'm pretty proud of those?
Oh yeah. Well, Orion the Hunter, the opening song was All Those Years, which Brad wrote the lyrics to, which I really like a lot. And of course, So You Ran was the single that did the best on the record for us. On the RTZ record, Face the Music is one of my favorites. Of course, When Your Love Comes Back Around, that Brian Mace wrote, was the most popular song from that. We actually made #1 back down in the DC, Baltimore area with that song.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Those albums have aged pretty well. You know, I have them, I listen to them, and they're fun albums. And the songs are real
Actually,
memorable.
there's a company in England, Rock Candy Records.
Oh yeah, yeah.
They've re-released my solo record, the Orion Hunter, and the RTZ record.
Yeah, I have all the Rock Candy versions of all those. Yeah,
You
they do a
do?
good job. They do a really good job.
They do.
So Barry, we have a lot of gearheads who watch this channel, And I'm sure they're going to want to hear you talk a little bit about the guitars and the gear, the effects, the amps you were using back then, and what are you playing these days?
Same stuff. Yeah, well, back then, we used exclusively Marshall amps. My back in 1968, I went to see Cream play here in Boston, and the curtains opened up, and there was Ginger Baker's drum set. There's more drums, more drums, more drums, and then Marshall stacks, and then more Marshall stacks, and more Marshall stacks. It's like, wow, I'd never seen that before. And Eric was playing an SG, and I left that show saying, I've got to have an SG in a Marshall stack.
Was that was it the psychedelic one he was playing? The one that I think Todd Rundgren wound up with after?
No, actually it wasn't.
No?
It wasn't. No. But I got a SG the next year. It was a 68 leftover, which I still have to this day, which I played on the Boston records and on the Boston tours. And at that time, I bought a 68 Marshall head, 100-watt head, that ended up in Tom's studio, which he used on the first two records, pretty much exclusively. When I went in to record the song Long Time, I thought, finally, I'm going to get to play through this Marshall amp that I bought that I'd never seen because it's in Tom's basement. And I went in to play, and he had a little Champ amp set up, little Fender Champ amp, the one with the 8-inch speaker.
Yep.
And that's what I played Long Time on. It was
Wow.
a little Champ amp and a Marshall distortion pedal.
Wow.
I have people write to me and say, "Oh, did you use this and that piece of gear?" I said, "No, it's just pedal into a little Champ amp." Really?
Sounded terrific.
Hey, it's right here. It's all in the fingers.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's so many. Yeah, I hear that all the time. It's like, you can buy all the pedals you want and get all the expensive amps you want, but when it comes right down to it, that tone is through these fleshy things, right at the end of the fingers.
Yeah, so I use that same equipment all through the Orion the Hunter tours or the RTZ tours. Nowadays, I still use the Marshall setup, but I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they've shrunk them down to like a 20-watt amplifier. So I use one of those. It's a angled speaker cabinet. It's like the 412 cabinet, but it's sliced in half, so it's 2 12s and like 20 watts. So the venues I'm playing are smaller venues, and works out really well. It sounds as good as the the giant ones, and doesn't make people deaf, and doesn't kill you moving it around.
Yeah, I mean, 20 watts is plenty loud enough. I mean, if you're not playing in an arena, right? That's you don't really need that a lot more.
As far as pedals go, I don't have anything I use all the time. I use a boost pedal, and maybe add some echo with an echo pedal, but not a whole lot. It's pretty straightforward.
SGs versus Les Pauls. I mean, obviously you prefer the.
Well, at this point, I used to use just exclusively the SG on everything, whether it worked or not. But nowadays, this last record, I used SG on a bunch of stuff. Les Paul. I used the Gretsch dual. What do we call it? The Sparkle Top Duosonic, I get. With an open tuning, for the slide stuff, and also Stratocaster. I use a Stratocaster in some things, and I never had a Telecaster, and I can always equate Telecasters with country for some reason, even though the first time I saw Led Zeppelin play, Jimmy Page was playing a Telecaster. I guess I kind of forgot about that. But anyway, I bought a custom shop Telecaster. It's one of these relic jobs, and I just absolutely love that. Just love it. So I've used that on quite a few songs too. So I'm really trying to, mix it up and not have one size fits all.
Yeah, Telly's a great instrument. I bought about a year and a half, 2 years ago. I bought an American standard Telly butterscotch
Yeah, sure.
with the maple neck. Sweet guitar, really,
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice and very different. I mean, that's what's great about, you play a Telly, you play an SG, a Les Paul, a Strat. They're all so different. They all have their place. They all feel differently. And it's like, depending on, if you're a guitar player, depending on the mood you're in or what you're playing, you have a weapon of choice, right? To fit.
Right. The bigger palette.
Yeah.
I do shows from time to time with an all-star band, the American Vinyl All-Star Band with Skunk Baxter as the other guitar player. And I was using a single pickup SG for that gig. And it used to drive Skunk crazy. Like, you need more of a palette here. I mean, come on. So I showed up with my Telecaster, and he was just so thrilled. Because, we do, with that band, we do a bunch of different music. We have somebody from James Brown's band. So we do, James Brown material. We do Wailers material. Obviously we do Steely Dan and Doobie Brothers. So, it's good to mix up the sounds with the Telecaster and the SG.
Yeah. Boy, Skunk's got some resume too, huh? That's another good player right there.
I've heard that he's played on 2,100 recordings.
Wow, so you might have Steve Lukather beat. Woo.
Well, I think he's got Steve beat.
Wow, because Steve Lukather's pretty prolific too. But wow, 2,100, that's a lot.
Yeah, I think his sound exchange payments are probably pretty substantial.
I would think so.
Well, believe it or not, he played with James Brown, and he said, "Oh yeah, when I played with James Brown," I said, "You playing with James Brown?" Well, I was watching TV the other night, and there was a show on James Brown, and there he is with the band all has the matching outfits with the matching outfit behind James Brown playing guitar.
Wow,
I mean, he can do anything, that guy.
Yeah, good player. Awesome. So before we let you go, I want you to plug the upcoming album one more time and tell people where they can find it and the name of it and all that good stuff.
Okay, it's Barry Goudreau's Engine Room. This record's called The Road. One of the lead songs on the album is called The Road. You can go to Barry Goudreau, barrygoudreausengineroom.com, and the information is there, but you'd be able to buy it on Venmo or if you have a post office box to send it in. And I think we're going to have the square set up for that as well. So
cool. Looking forward
March
to
19th.
Awesome. Right around the corner. 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, something like that. A little over 2 weeks. So
yeah, 3 weeks from Friday.
Awesome. And hopefully you guys can get out and play some shows later this summer. I think that'd be great as well. And
yeah, we're planning on having a record release June 5th. So hopefully, keep our fingers crossed that everything keeps going the way it is, and that can happen. And hopefully by, the end of the summer, the fall, we'll all be back 100% out in front of the fans again. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Barry, thanks so much for joining us here today. We love hearing these stories, and we all love the music the albums you've played on, the music you've created, and we're looking forward to hearing more. So thanks to the wonderful, the talented Barry Goudreau for joining us here on the channel today. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. For Barry Goudreau, I am Pete Pardo. Good night, everybody.
Okay.